All right, so this is the mentoring session rather than the other sessions, which I've seen a few of you a few times this week in different things, legislative groups and different things. But the mentoring session, so it's open really to anything for anyone to share, ask in regard to anything really. So feel free.
Okay, I go. Yesterday, when we were talking before, I shared an experience where I was in a chamber before the throne of the Father and the throne of the Lord, and I was being measured. Or actually, the first time I was there, I was being weighed. This time I was being measured. And you said you thought that might have been the Lord of the court, or the court of the Lord. I just want to expound a little bit more on what happened. When I stood there and I recognized where I was, because I had been there once before, it was like I was surrounded by these angels that were like healers. And I mean, they were measuring everything, the circumference of my head, the size of my hands, everything. And when they left, I was like covered in this jumpsuit of pearlescence, light, I mean, I was covered in something, and I heard garment of light. And that was cool and all. I didn't even see my hair. I mean, that was cool and all, but the strange, unsettling part of that encounter was then I felt all alone. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Why am I here, standing here all alone? And the scene changed, and I'm in the hallway, and I can go right or left. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me which way to go, Lord. But again, nothing. I mean, I felt so alone. And the scene started to move and rush past me. But it was so unsettling. I said, I got to come out of this. I got to come out of this. And, I talked to a few people that I'm in fellowship with in the Gospel generation. And they were like, well, it was union. You're used to seeing and talking to God separate from you, but it was union. I felt so dumb, like I totally blew the encounter. But I'm going to tell you, that was one of the most unsettling, the enemy doesn't fear me. I mean, I'm not afraid of the enemy. I'm not afraid of all that stuff. But that was very unsettling. Just feel like I was alone and I did not recognize Holy Spirit or Abba or the Lord standing there coaching me and governing and guiding.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, very unsettling. I had to come out of it. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the garment of light. I said, stop. Let's put this one on the shelf, please. This is unsettling for me.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of experience of having any of that myself. So I couldn't really say, to be honest, in terms of what that refers to. I have had experiences where I've been unsettled, that's for sure, in a sense of not understanding where I was or being unsure of where I was and understanding the protocols and different things. But I've not felt alone, I must admit. I felt completely different at times. When I first started to go into the realms above heaven, into heaven of heavens and perfection and those realms, they felt like I was breathing a different atmosphere, living in a different atmosphere. The first time I went into the Court of 70, it was so bright and intense I couldn't even see. My eyes had to get accustomed to a different level. It felt like I was breathing a different atmosphere. And I was, and it took me some time to get used to different environments and be aware of the differences that are there. But I can't say I've been in the court of the Lord, so in that way. So I wouldn't know what it feels like, to be honest. I mean, it may well be, in some senses, if you look at it being a place where you are being measured and weighed, then God is wanting to actually, in a sense, weigh and judge what your reaction to him not being there will be. And in reality, you probably had a good reaction in that, hey, I don't want to be anywhere where I don't actually feel the presence of God or are aware of God with me or being here. So it may well be, and that was the right reaction to have. Hey, I need to be out of here because I never want to feel on my own, because God promises never to leave me in that sense. But also, if you take it with, okay, I'm being given this whole new garment, which is a garment of light, and I'm supposed to be a son of light and a son of God, and God is light, then I would say the more we mature and the more we grow in our relationship with God and become more God-like, the more it might actually feel that we are not alone, but we are more like God. So in the ages to come, it may be we get to rule in terms of things which are way beyond what we're doing right now. I don't know what the feelings would be that came with that. But it'd be interesting, to go back and to ask God, engage God with it, and actually say, okay, what were you testing? When I felt alone, what were you testing? What were you actually trying to show me? Was that something? How was my response? Did I respond the right way? Just ask him about it, because we're going to enter into many different sorts of encounters. Some of them may well be very unique and individual for us that no one else will understand. But what you're looking for is certain principles of how God does certain things that we can just relate to, rather than the detailed specifics of those things. It's certainly an interesting encounter, and I think the fact that it unsettled you is good enough for you to go back and ask, why was I unsettled? Now, if there was an issue with your soul, and this was highlighting a soul issue in which there was some fear attached to this because of your soul being connected to it rather than what your spirit is connected to, then again that will be something then to go into and ask, well, okay, how do I deal with that area? How do I get so that I'm not unsettled? It's like people go through the dark night of the soul and those things, and it's almost like, well, where's God? Where is he? Well, he was there. And you get the classic picture of the footprints in the sand, and he was, I can only see one set of footprints. Well, where did God go? Well, God didn't go anywhere. He was just carrying you, and it's that. But at the time, you wouldn't think that because it didn't feel like he was there, So interesting type of experience, which may open up different things to you depending on what the outworking of that was designed to be by God, And I always want to know, is this something that's connected into my soul, or is this something that I'm learning in my spirit? And they're not always easy to differentiate, particularly, when it's quite an emotional experience, because my spirit has emotions as well as my soul has emotions. So if I'm feeling something in my spirit, it doesn't necessarily mean that my soul is passing those emotions, but my spirit flows through my soul so I can understand things. So it's usually you have a sense of feelings or a sense of how things work that you're familiar with. God isn't going to do something that's so unfamiliar to you that you don't understand it in that sense. So you look for the signs that connect and enable you to begin to associate some of the encounters with things that can give you a clue. And you sort of learn to discern some of the signs and symbols of encounters that trigger understanding and revelation. And if in doubt, I always go back and ask, for more. If I'm unsure, I go back and ask for more. And depending on the situation, sometimes it feels like God is just round the next corner and he wants us to pursue him. And it's some of those things are designed to train us and equip us and help us in the future. And you know, I'm sure you needed that experience, whatever it was for. Otherwise, God wouldn't have gave you it. So, it'd be quite interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of development of my soul in the encounters, almost like a restoration or training of my soul. You know, and these three agree. And then the body. There's just been a lot of inclusion of my soul that's been different recently. But yeah, it was very disturbing. It was not even like in the corner. It was like, where are you? I almost feel I understand what God was saying when He went to Adam. Where are you? Because it was like, where are you?
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. You're welcome. Okay. Anyone else got anything they'd like to share or ask?
Yes, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Go for it then, Carl.
Mike, I had an encounter several years ago where when I was going to bed, I felt sick all over, kind of like a flu coming on, and I was at somebody else's house. But anyway, I had an encounter during the night, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt euphoric. I mean, every symptom of everything I had, and I felt great. I felt like nothing I've felt before. Have you ever encountered something like that the many times you've went into the courts, into heaven, and so forth?
Not specifically. I mean, sometimes I do wake up euphoric, having things gone on in the night. But generally, I mean, the most I can relate that to is my encounters within the dark cloud, and I did get physically ill. I poisoned myself with poisoned water, but I felt no moving to try and fight it. It was a strange thing. It was almost like everything came to the end. You know, my physical. I was at the end of my physical thing. I'd been fasting for 7 or 8 days, and then I couldn't keep any water down for 5 or 6 days, and I was completely at the end of my physical strength. But I didn't feel, because God just said wait. You know, and I was, and He was like, wait. That was what He said, wait expectantly. And I was in that period of waiting expectantly, so I was like, okay, I didn't feel to call you call the elders and come and pray for you or any of that. I didn't even feel to fight. I just felt I'm just going to wait then, and then my emotions then came to a complete end, and so I was totally bereft of everything. And then at the end of it, because God told me that I was going to have a breakthrough on a particular day, and I was by that time about 10 days away from that period, and I was fasting, and that day I basically woke up and everything completely gone, and I was completely back to normal, as if I hadn't fasted and if I hadn't poisoned myself. So from that, it totally it just happened actually overnight, and I was completely back to normal, having gone through a terrible time. But the result of it changed my whole life. So I'm aware of sometimes what we see on the surface is not always, things. I'm not saying that God poisoned me, but God used the fact that I poisoned myself and wasn't really encouraging me to try and get out of it. Now, I wasn't fearful of my physical condition or anything like that. Some of them, my wife around me was. She was sort of like, no, you can't go 5 days without drinking and having not had anything to eat for 8 days before that or whatever. You can't do it. I said, well, I can, but so I did. So God used that, although I don't ever believe God caused it, but He certainly brought good out of it. And I think God's always looking to bring good out of everything. So in a sense, you look at some of those things, okay, was the enemy trying to do something? it could have been, and then God said, right, I'm having the last laugh here. So then you wake up and wow, everything's amazing. Some of it is just being sensitive to be aware of the things that are going on. And I find that I don't attribute things to God or the enemy as easy as I used to. I want to get the discernment to be aware of what is actually going on around me, so that I can actually cooperate with God and oppose the enemy, of course. But I'm very aware that God, even what the enemy has plans for harm, God can turn it around for good. And so sometimes you have to be really understanding of what it is that God wants us to do. And for this, I wouldn't encourage anyone to do what I did, because normally I would say, get someone to come and pray with you, or do the things that the Word says, make declarations or do whatever you do when you get in terms of the situation of healing. But I just knew not to do that, But I certainly wouldn't encourage anyone else to do the same thing. But everyone needs to get their own revelation, understanding of that situation, so that they can operate in a correct way. But a lot of people are just like, oh, look what the enemy's doing, look what the enemy's doing. And I sometimes look and think, actually, yeah, that might be what the enemy's doing, but actually, why is that happening? And is there a bigger purpose? Because sometimes God uses what the enemy's doing, tricks him into doing something, and then uses it to bring about a massive change and transformation. Yeah. So I can't say I've had a specific experience like that, but I can sort of relate to what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. You never planned to feel euphoric after anything encounter. It just happened.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't really sort of look at feelings much, in a sense. I don't, someone once said, your emotions are a good servant and a bad master. And I don't tend to focus on exactly what I'm feeling. More, I just get led by my spirit, which actually more directs my feelings. But I'm sort of a fairly even sort of guy, so I don't sort of really have huge highs and any lows. So I tend to be just me. So I don't tend to think of euphoric things. Although sometimes I get excited, and sometimes I sense sometimes a sense of urgency or a sense of weight to something. But yeah, I don't look. I must admit, I'm not really of the camp that's looking for ecstatic encounters. It's great if God does that, and if He takes me into a trance or does something, great. I mean, I'll go with it, and I'll, have experience whatever it is I'm supposed to experience. But I don't pursue those things. For me, I'd like to look at this. I want to live how I'm supposed to live, and I know I can't live in a trance. So I don't tend to pursue trances as a source of revelation, because I want to live from dual realms all the time. So I want to be aware of flowing from one realm to another. Now, sometimes I know God takes you out of a situation because He's got a purpose for it, and I'm not against it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm in a meeting and the Holy Spirit's presence is there and He's inspiring, an emotional response, I can easily respond emotionally, usually with tears, but quite often, if there's laughter going around, I'm very sensitive to pick it up. So I wouldn't reject anything that's happening like that. I just don't, in a sense, pursue it. I'm very happy for whatever God wants to do to go, but generally, I just want to live this life. In a way that anyone else can live this life, and I know groups of people focus on the supernatural experience type of things, and it's like, oh yeah, just get whacked in the spirit and everything will be great. That hasn't been my experience. I've had being whacked in the spirit and stuck to the floor and couldn't move and had to be carried out and everything else, and still didn't have any revelation of what was going on about it, until later, and even I've probably been in most situations that people have been in terms of supernatural experiences, and I actually realized that most of them were unfathomable at the time. And actually, I'd rather have something that I understood and could function in. So, you know, so they're great when they happen, but I don't try and promote them. And I certainly, in any time I have meetings, you know, I don't hype anything. You know, it's just like I'm just me, normal, and I'm pretty laid back, and I don't really try and manipulate emotional situations or do anything like that, because I just don't think that's the way to do it. You know. So, you know, people might find me a bit boring in that sense, but I have great fun, you know, but it's not something I necessarily show very much, but I do, you know. So, yeah.
Hey, Mike.
Hiya.
This is Brad.
Hi, Brad.
Hadn't seen you in a while. Good to see you. I have something I want to share with you that happened this for the last few months. My seeing realm had shut down, and I'm friends with a guy who got me involved with your ministry. His name is Darren Larson. He's from Canada, and we've been talking about why the seeing realm had shut down and different things, and he kind of helped me trace it back that I had gotten after I had left the Ian Clayton conference. I got real excited about this is what God has me doing. I'm writing this book, and I had to go directly back to a job to make finances for my family, and didn't really get into what I wanted to do. And I realized that I had gotten, not realizing I had gotten angry, and it kind of had shut down that whole relationship I was having with God, and I was looking for things to happen in circumstances. And anyhow, I just kind of, when I recognized that, I began to allow the Lord to deal with that, and I surrendered into this job that God has me doing, and I began to actually mentor the guys that God has put me over. I started with 2 guys, I'm over 10 guys, and we put in DirecTV satellite systems. And as I gave into the process, then my brother came home from my parents' 50th anniversary, and both of my brothers did. But some reason when I'm around him, it's like my seeing realm just clicks on. And I know part of it was because I had worked through the process of my anger, but as soon as he got down, I began to have these experiences with the cloud of witnesses. And they were just, I mean, it's just some really neat things that God showed me. One of them is that I engaged with Moses, and basically he was saying to me about my book series, he was saying, did you know that, like you, I wanted to share God with my generation, and that's why I wanted to write? And that just opened my heart up to seeing Moses in a different way. He was in a way kind of an author, and never saw it that way. So that led to another experience where I was engaging with John the Beloved, and I saw John look into Jesus' eyes, saw eternity in Jesus. And he saw that whatever his dreams were, whatever he had got to put in him, he knew he had eternity to work those things out. And I began to, talk to him about why do we engage with, need to engage with the cloud? Why don't we go directly to Jesus? And he said, it was very interesting. As I was talking to John, I looked over and Moses said, well, don't you realize when you engage in the Bible, you're engaging through the cloud, because we experienced him and we saw him the same way that John was seeing into Jesus' eyes. We saw him, and you're seeing through our view of what we saw through the Word. And in a way that the cloud of witnesses is there in the Word, that we're seeing through their eyes, their revelation. So anyhow, all these things began to flow, and God began to open doors to help me understand, and it just brought me back to, it seems like, where I was when I had left that conference. And I just wondered, I talked to Darren about it again. He said that he felt like not only had I worked through my anger, but when my brothers were around, that we're creating an arc between each other, and that's opening that realm. I kind of wanted to know what your thoughts were on these things.
Um, yeah, I mean, definitely anger is a, a very negative emotion. And obviously, basically, God said, don't let the sun go down in your anger, because you give a foot place or a landing place for the enemy. And I think it's a warning for all of us to make sure we deal with things emotionally: disappointment, upset, feeling let down, any of those negative emotions. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And anger is usually an expression of injustice, which is a hope deferred. That's why we get angry, because we feel let down or disappointed, or something hasn't worked out the way we want. We have a way that we think it should work, and then God doesn't do it the way we think, and therefore we get disappointed. Hope deferred always makes the heart sick, and the issues of life, according to Proverbs, flow from the heart. And that's why things close down. The heart gets sick. It isn't functioning properly. Therefore, our imagination doesn't function properly because of that. And we're all susceptible to it. And it's so important to make sure that we do not sleep with the enemy. So when we go to bed, make sure we've dealt with the issues of the day, which means we may need to forgive people, we may need to ask for forgiveness, but make sure that we've dealt with the issues of the day, and do not go to sleep with the enemy having access to our soul, because then that then builds, and it's so important to finish the day having started the day, so that they meet, and so that you don't end up carrying the next day what you carried the day before, because there are fresh mercies every day. There isn't mercy for dealing with yesterday or dealing with tomorrow. There's only the mercy for today. And it is so important to make sure we do not sleep with the enemy. Sleeping with the enemy is a really bad deal. I want to sleep with God. I want to sleep so my spirit is in the realm of heaven. I'm doing things there, and I'm functioning in rest. So I think that's one point there, which is a really key one. And become sensitive to disturbances in your spirit. So so that they're really good indicators that there's something that we haven't dealt with, or something that we need to deal with, because we feel a loss of peace. That loss of peace is a good indicator that we need to deal with something. From the other perspective, definitely you can have people that connect with you and form an arc and open something up, but then when you're not near them, that arc is not there, and some people then struggle. Well, how can I do that in a corporate setting, and I can't do it on my own? It's because something's opened up, because there's an exponential sense of when we come together, 2 or 3 are gathered, then something happens in a different way. The key is to then take anything that happens in that type of experience, and then go back and then engage it individually, practice it until you can do it yourself, because you've always got an arc between God and you.
Yeah, that helped me, because I was concerned about when he leaves. Going back to this, or have I recalled this anger? Because I don't want to lose the seed realm. I'm learning so much. And just I want to stay in my relationship with God. I don't want to sleep with the enemy.
Yeah, but it is, when we recognize that God is with us, and actually Father, Son, and Spirit are within us, then when we come into agreement with them, it's like we're in agreement with the bench of 3, and we form a window or a doorway or a portal by being in agreement. We produce 4, which is the flow. That's where things can flow through the portal, because we come into agreement. So there's always an opportunity of having agreement, and that's what doesn't require anybody else. And sometimes the experiences that we have when we do things corporately and with others who inspire us or we connect with, and something opens up as a result of, should encourage us not to seek for more experiences with that person, but to go back to God and actually find that in God and in my relationship with God, that the same I can have the same experiences through connecting with Him as I can with other people. That doesn't make me want to be independent with other people, but definitely not dependent or codependent, but interdependent. So what I bring hopefully can inspire something with others, but then you really look then for them to go and engage that with God rather than come back and look for more from the person. Otherwise we'll be trying to draw from somebody that is not a healthy thing to do, you know, because anything we do engage with individuals, the fullness of that is always going to be found in God and not in that person. And that's a safe way of then drawing and pursuing something, but pursuing it with God and God in us, rather than pursuing it in another person, which can create dysfunctional relationships. Because we'll be looking for that person to create an environment where I can see or do, and that's not a good thing to have, you know. But anyway, there we go. Okay, anyone else got anything they want to share? Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to share a little bit of a testimony first, and then I had a question. But wanted to just say that our lives have changed so much with this program, and wanted to give a testimony to framing your day, and to the ketubah, and to what just. And I'll be honest, when I first started framing my day, it was very rote. I wasn't fully connected to it. But as I was faithful in that, God morphed that into something that was unique between the two of us.
Yeah.
And so it became mine. And then when you introduced the ketubah, that put another dimension on it for me. And I took that, and I had to morph that more into a covenant, because I had trouble putting expectations on God. So he said, focus on becoming one with me, and this will happen. So that's kind of where I took that into becoming one with him in covenant relationship. And so every day I begin my day like that. And just as a quick testimony for Carl Corzone and myself, is that we began this rote, and we don't recognize our own lives and the lives of our families. It is so affecting and impacting our families and the project. So it works. And I know that in people really shy away from doing things rotely, but I just want to encourage people it's a template to just step into that and then allow that to become between you and God. But it's the faithfulness of staying in there and continuing and creating that well-worn path that opens up the change. Am I echoing? Because I'm hearing myself.
Not with me, I can, but...
Okay. But my question was this. Every day I've started, yeah, that broke the echo for me, going into eternity, and that's where I begin my day, when coming into oneness with God, and standing in eternity in gratefulness and thankfulness. Just that's kind of how everything starts. Well, about 3 months ago, the men in white linen started showing up, and there's just an enormous amount of activity there. And just want to encourage everybody, there's a lot happening in eternity if they want to just go there. But some very unusual things, and I won't go into any details other than the one thing that is very perplexing, and I don't quite understand what to do with it. But there's been a lot of them coming up to me and in a very friendly, kind, intimate way, blowing in my face. And as they do that, I just receive it, and I don't have any real revelation on that and what to do with that, other than I'm releasing that into the atmosphere here. But I just didn't know if you had anything that you could share on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a really good positive testimony, in the sense of a lot of people want the experiences but don't want to put in the hard work. and therefore only want it by experience. And I think, I don't want people trying to copy my experiences. I just want to open up a path that develops people's experiences. But you have to start somewhere. That's what testimony is about. You use someone else's testimony to kickstart your own path, and then the more you stick with it, it becomes something which is very uniquely yours. And I think that's a good, really positive testimony for people who struggle with that. Oh, well, I'm just sort of doing it and copying it, and but if you do stick with it, it definitely does develop into your own way, because it's supposed to. You're supposed to actually find your own path, your own way, which is unique in relationships, definitely. In terms of the cloud of witnesses, I find there is a lot of activity at the moment with the cloud of witnesses. They do seem to be very active, very excited about people coming into destiny and their connection, and those who have similar mantles and similar things. They seem to be very excited about that. In terms of the blowing in the face, I mean, the only thing I can think of in that would be, when God breathed into Adam the breath of life, and so they are carrying something that is connected to your destiny, that carries life in it, and when they breathe it, you're doing exactly the right thing. You're then breathing it out. And so what you breathe in, because it's essentially the name of God. The name of God, Yod He Vav He, is the rhythm and breath of life. So he breathed into us, and the first thing Adam did was to breathe out. So he breathed out the Yod, which is symbolic of the hand of God in the Father's hand, therefore the authority to do something, because God breathed that authority in, and then he administered out, if effectively. Then he breathed back in, Yod He. So he breathed in He, so he's now drawing again on a new set of resource, and then he breathes out Vav, and then in He, and the whole process is a continual drawing on the life of God. And I sort of, that's how I sort of view my life in what I'm doing, is receiving and breathing in and then administrating that outwards. So in this sense, the cloud of witnesses blowing, breathing into your face is like that's carrying something of the life that they have within God to impart to you. And the key is, again, breathing it out, using it to actually speak, frame, order, direct, govern, rule. As we look in, we receive the revelation, we breathe it in, we then speak it out, direct it out. So it's always this in, out, in, out. So the priest looks in, the king speaks out, the prophet looks in, the apostle breathes out. So you have lion, ox, eagle, man, continually in, out, connecting and releasing what we receive in that relationship. So that might have something to do with it, but you're certainly doing the right thing with it anyway, which is to release it out, because that's the key. We don't want to keep anything in. If you breathe in and don't breathe out, you die, essentially, because all you've got is carbon dioxide left, which is poisonous. So in a sense, we have to breathe out what we receive in, because most of what we're given is not for us. It's for actually the world around us. And if we try and keep it to ourselves, it becomes toxic. And a lot of people suffer from toxicity because they don't give away what God's given them, because it was never intended just for them. So that's the only thing I can sort of think around that type of experience. But it's great. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Hi, Mike.
Hiya.
Hi, everybody. I had a question about the 7 spirits. Pamela, Carl, and I have been going in. We entered into the pillars and asked wisdom to just take us to the seven spirits, and we spent time in each one. It was an amazing. We spent like 3 days doing that, but it was some amazing encounters. But I was wondering something. You know, we're so busy with life, and we do want the rhythm and the breath of God and the Yod Hey Vav Hey to dominate really our spirit during the day as we're busy doing the things that we do. But one thing I began doing, and I hadn't seen any results yet, but was wondering what you thought about this, is that when I go to bed at night, I park my spirit. I go to Wisdom's Heights, enter the pillars, and I park my spirit in the classroom of the seven spirits. You know, I figure I'm going to be sleeping, so if I park my spirit there, then they could teach me in the night season. I've been doing that this week, and I haven't really noticed anything from that, although there's an acute awareness, a heightened awareness within me that they are present, even though I'm not really engaging constantly with them or anything. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that nutso or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's what it is for you, definitely. I find that my engagement with the seven spirits is very much, they are just integrated with my life. So when my spirit is living in the realms of heaven, they impart revelation that I need to bring. I'm receiving that. They're authorizing in my position and the mandate for that. But they're just totally involved. And I, when I go to sleep, I engage my spirit and release it for whatever God wants to do, or whatever I will do during the night, and I go to sleep in the same way. But I feel that you'll probably realize it's not a cognitive necessary understanding that you need. What you need is to receive that in your spirit, and then your spirit just functions in it, and therefore you're not having to, oh, well, what did that do? You don't need to figure out what it did. You just flow in what it did, and you'll find that your spirit becomes more of a flowing, and it's like just intuitively doing things, because your spirit has that revelation, information, authority, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, counsel, all those things. It's like I need the counsel of the seven spirits all the time, but it doesn't mean I have to go to the spirit of counsel. I'm aware that the spirit of counsel has free reign to impart to me anything I need, so I can release it. I can live in it. I can live according to it. So that's how I desire to function. My spirit in heaven now, preparing ahead of time, so that everything's always available to me now when I need it in this realm, because of the interaction with all the resources of heaven, including the seven spirits of God and wisdom and everything else I need. My spirit is able to impart and flow, and my soul just comes into agreement, and I do say whatever it is that my spirit's leading me to do and say. So I don't try and figure it out or understand it. I just do it and live it. So definitely a really good place to hang out and sleep, and but don't necessarily expect that you will, I know exactly what happened. You just will start to benefit from it, and you'll find your spirit becomes more authoritative, more understanding of identity and who you are and what you're called to do, and all those different functions of the seven spirits of God in bringing us into sonship. will be demonstrated in how your spirit rules as a son. Even if your soul is not fully aware of it all, your spirit will certainly function that way.
Thank you so much. That's great. Whenever you were talking about the Yod-Hey, Vav-Hey, you said that it was the rhythm and the breath of God. That really resonated with me as well as what you just said. So thank you so much for that. That's excellent.
Yeah. And even the sound of it sounds like that. When you actually listen to the sound of your breathing, it sounds, that you're breathing out, and in the name of God. It's just the way in which our breath sounds like that, and obviously it's designed to, because that means we're constantly aware of God's presence and God's impartation and our responsibility to release it. So we can speak from what we've received and shape, form, govern, rule, subdue, all the things we're supposed to do, be fruitful, to multiply, to fill, to subdue and rule, just comes from, just like it was with Adam, his relationship and presence with God, that just is life. I think that's the reality. It is life. And then when you can connect that up with the four faces of God and the governmental aspects of Yod-Hey, Vav-Hey, it means that you're constantly able to operate in a royal priesthood with apostolic prophetic outworking in your life. Because that's just how life was designed to be. It was designed to just be totally connected with God, and completely. It's like, whoever is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with Him, and it's that oneness that is the reality of what we're really trying to describe and live. And once you're living it, you don't have to sort of separate it all up to understand it. It's just life. It is just a life on a different level.
It must be what Jesus was talking about in Acts 17:28, I believe.
Yeah.
In Him I live and move
have my
being.
Yeah, I exist effectively in Him. Yeah,
Right.
That's exactly what it is. And that sums it up really well, because it's just like, this is just complete life. How He intended it to be in that way. And we're becoming untethered to the things that have connected us to the need for receiving life from this world, into the reality that we can receive life from His world, and then in relationship with Him frame this world and shape this world according to that world, which was what Adam's role was to be. It was essentially to bring heaven to the earth. And you can go to the extreme lengths of that is Breatharianism. Those that I think, is it Kirby de la Rona, he doesn't eat.
Right.
So he basically believes that the breath of God, the breath of life, is enough to sustain him. And the only thing he generally eats is communion, a small portion of communion, which is, again, taking in the life of God and feasting on His life, body and blood. Now, I believe that's entirely possible, but I do believe you need a mandate to live that way. And actually, for me, Jesus didn't live that way. So if I was to actually live on breath, then, which I believe I'm quite capable of doing, He would have to really tell me to. Because I like food, and Jesus actually demonstrated eating with His disciples, even after the resurrection, having prepared breakfast for them. I think if it was supposed to be how we lived all the time, then Jesus would have probably communicated that by not actually eating with the disciples after His resurrection, which was different from before His resurrection, but He did yet. And I think it's okay to eat. It's not a lesser or greater form, one way or another. It is just what you are called to do. And I respect that guy. He's called to do that. He embraces that. It helps people realize that you're not dependent on the world around you. but also, you know, they broke bread from house to house and fellowshiped and ate together. So there's I think, a way of living which encompasses whatever God's calling you to do. And yes, I think I know I can live on the breath of life if I need to, but I don't need to unless God told me to deliberately, and He hasn't. So I don't pursue that because He's not told me. But I also honor and recognize that those who do, great. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I'm called to that.
No,
But I'm open to it if he does.
You know, but you know, we don't know, you know, in the future what, you know, circumstances there may be and what we need to be able to do.
Right.
You know, but also Jesus showed us how to multiply food. He showed us how to get things from supernatural resources. He told us how we can turn water into wine and actually turn one thing into another. I do believe we will use those things, and I think we will, in Embassies of Heaven, we will demonstrate those type of supernatural things to be able to effectively live from a heavenly perspective on the earth, not subject to the conditions of the earth. You know, but he also told people to go and plant crops, you know. So, you know, it's being free and able to do everything that God says, and only doing what you see the Father doing. And I don't see the Father, for me, living by breath alone. You know, that's just because He hadn't showed me that, you know. But I'm sure He's shown others, and that's exactly what they're doing, and therefore they're worshipping God in their way of being obedient to that lifestyle. I think in everything, we just must be careful that we don't put on somebody else what is our personal revelation and call to live, but we always encourage people to go back to God for themselves so that they get their personal revelation of how they should live, and never try and impose something on each other, but always encourage us that all of us can hear God for ourselves on a daily basis, and then we're free. So yeah, that's right. You know, I think all of us are unique individual, and God has shaped us for a particular destiny and purpose, and that's what we need to find. You know, irrespective of what anyone else is doing, we have a destiny that has been agreed with us, and will only really be fully fulfilled in that when we outwork it. You know? So, yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'm going to